All right, welcome back to another episode of Path of Purpose. Today I have my friend Pierre coming on the pod. Pierre is studying transpersonal psychology. He's also done research on purpose, and he also works in e-commerce. So Pierre, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Cool. All right, let's get right into what interests you about studying purpose through an academic perspective.
Well, I think for me it's mostly it's in part at least because it's about my own personal journey of trying to figure out what is my own life purpose and aligning my life on it, right? And it's also, of course, I also have just intellectual appreciation for this kind of complex intellectual topics.
I was reading some of the resources that you sent me, and I see within academic context, there seems to be different definitions. Is there a definition that you feel like is a better definition? Or if someone was going to ask you, hey, Pierre, you're studying purpose, what's a good definition for how to define it?
Well, you're right. There are many different definitions. At first, when I was trying to create an understanding in my own mind of what is purpose, I was struggling a bit because there is no one-fits-all definition. But basically, a good one that I found, you can see it as a self-organizing life aim. It's like a central aim in your life around which your identity, your actions, and your behaviors are centered. It involves goals, of course, because it is future oriented, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like let's say an overarching goal that you would have in life, but you can never really achieve it. Instead, it's like a source of goals. It will renew itself, right? So let's say, for example, your goal is to be an amazing athlete in pole vaulting. I'm taking Duplantis example. If the goal is to be national champion, then the goal will renew itself to be world champion. If you've achieved everything athletically, maybe your goal will be to coach others doing the same. So it's like auto-renewing. And also it's really based on your personal capabilities and interests, right? Your skill.
So is this the Cashton and McKnight 2009 definition, that one?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Do you have it on you, or I can pull it up just so the viewers
no, I
can?
don't. If you have it, you can.
Okay, I'll find it. McKnight 2009 purpose. See, it would be helpful right now to have a Jamie, like Joe Rogan has Jamie.
Yeah,
Maybe
exactly.
Jamie, pull that up.
Jamie.
All right, I think this is it. Yeah, purpose in life as a system. Here we go. Okay, they say, here's part of it at least. It says, a central self-organizing life aim that organizes and stimulates goals, manages behaviors, and provides a sense of meaning.
Exactly, and meaning is a good point to bring up now, actually, because to really understand what purpose is, you have to understand what meaning is. And in my research, I found it even more complex than purpose, because meaning is something much broader. So you could define meaning as, let's say, your personal myth, something shaping your identity. So everything in your life goes into this coherent narrative that you're creating about your own life.
Yeah.
Your relationships, your values, your goal, your beliefs, everything is shaped into a narrative, right? That creates kind of your identity. So that's meaning. And
wait, can we dig into that? Do you mind?
Yeah, of course.
So what do you mean by myth? Like our own personal myth?
Well, it's like your own personal story of which you're the hero. So in this way, it's kind of a myth, You're trying to achieve something in life. You're trying to figure out the direction. You're trying to figure things out.
So myth as in, when you say myth, you mean to me, that sounds like you're defining purpose again.
Well, so the difference is let's say meaning is the story you're telling yourself. I mean, not telling yourself, but it's like the narrative of your own life. So it's also about understanding the present and the past. what does this interaction mean? What are my values, my beliefs? This is mostly based on the past, right? And purpose is future oriented. So your purpose can emerge from your meaning, right? My values are A, B, and C. So my purpose is this specific orientation that I have in my life. So my values are, love, compassion, taking care of the poor. So my purpose is to take care of the poor through creating a charity, for example, that takes care of homeless people. So that would be the purpose.
Yeah.
And then the purpose itself can create meaning for you. So it's like a bi-directional, through which you create meaning for yourself.
So is the purpose? So are we creating our?
Oh, that's also a very interesting question. I think there are different ways, there are different perspectives to have. I think for most people, we are not necessarily born with a purpose, or at least we don't know what our purpose is. You can have a whole physical discussion on, is your purpose predetermined or not? Are you just going to discover it, or are you actually building it? That goes almost into metaphysics. I'm not sure it's not really the point. The point is that you have to find it most of the time. There can be events in your life which will trigger you to question everything and will make your purpose clear to you.
Yeah.
So let's say a near-death experience. In this case, your purpose might just come to you more naturally. But in most cases, at least in the literature, they say that it's a constant trial and error process. You're figuring out step by step, right? And it can be a combination. So it can be a major event in your life that makes you reconsider things. And then from that, you're going to start to build your purpose.
Why do you think that is in a near-death experience that our life's purpose might become more clear?
So of course, I haven't had one. But what I could say is that perhaps in this instance, everything that you thought was important to you, especially if it's anything related to material values, success, sex, all the more material things that you might pursue in life, you're going to realize that they're not that important, and you're going to realize what really matters. So it's like a blank canvas. It's like throwing out everything that didn't matter, and then you're able to see clearly what really matters to you, what's left.
Wow. Yeah. As you're saying that, it makes me think of when I was in college and prior to my dad getting sick, I was just a regular college kid and cared about just going out and drinking and partying and trying to get a career that was just going to give me as much money as possible. And for me, that experience of having, in this case, it wasn't a near-death experience, but it was an onset of grief of fear of losing my dad, because when he was diagnosed with cancer, it was terminal. And for me, that forced me to look at my values at the time of hey, what am I doing? My values from how I'm living my life seem to be around trying to make as much money as possible, being as productive and busy as possible, and trying to go out and just meet women and party. Which was for me, it forced me to look at that and was this is not a value system and a way of living that is conducive to going through grieving a loss.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think what can happen also is that you, in those instances where you realize what truly matters, so your close ones or your own health, if you have a health scare, for example, you might realize that your life is more ephemeral than you thought. Of course, that will make you reconsider things, right?
Yeah.
It's funny. It's kind of funny to quote Jeff Bezos on this, but I have this interesting quote from him. He calls it the regret minimization framework. Of course, so this means basically, if you were on your deathbed today, what would you regret?
Yeah.
And so maybe in a way, your purpose in life should be to minimize that. That's the way he explains it.
You're saying our purpose in life should be to minimize our regrets that we have on our deathbed.
Yeah, well, maybe it's not a direct goal. It's not a direct relationship in this way, but by pursuing your life purpose and let's say higher consciousness values, higher values, you will have less regrets. That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
So if I go back to my own example, right, to mention I'm working in the corporate world. Now I'm studying transpersonal psychology. If I didn't do this now, if I didn't try to figure out what is my higher purpose, let's say, that would be my biggest regret. And then if I discover my life purpose and I don't enact it, that will be my biggest regret. But I don't think, of course, it's not limited to purpose. You will have other things that it's taking care of your family that might not be your life purpose per se. That can be maybe a life purpose that you can have.
To me, the question that comes to mind is, how can I live a life on purpose?
What do you mean by your life on purpose?
Like, how can I live my purposeful life?
It's the same question I'm asking myself every day.
Yeah. But it also makes me think of like, is this... Because to me, it sounds like there's a lot of academic literature that is trying to solve a bigger question here.
Yeah, and I think there might be also a trap in this, right? Because if we keep pursuing something, maybe we're not being enough. Maybe we're not living our life enough, just enjoying the little moments. So I think it's a balancing act. I think it's important to have an overarching, not sure how you say it, but it's an overarching goal in life that you want to pursue, a higher purpose, a mission, vocation. But if it detracts you from enjoying the small moments in life, maybe you went wrong somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's really important to not forget that there might be purpose in just being, right? In just being present.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
And that's also a mistake I make sometimes, to be transparent and honest.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a common pitfall, I think, especially in a society that values career success and mattering. You want to matter, you want to make a dent.
Yeah.
Right. It can be easy to forget that we're just here to be.
Yeah. 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 Which I think comes back to how is this truly something that we can just think through? And like, is our purpose something that can just be like cognitively thought through? And to me, it like you said, it's like there's a portion to it that's like being present and being. And so to me, like that, the answer to that question would be no, it's not something we can just like think through. So then my question to you becomes, what is the role of academic literature in studying one's life's purpose? What does the role of that become?
Yeah, and actually, I mean, we are both studying transpersonal psychology, so you can extend this question to what is the role of academic literature in studying anything related to this field, because this whole field is mostly about experiencing and being, right?
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, it's the same as in spiritual traditions. What are the teachings there for? Right, so academic literature is not exactly teachings, but can kind of make a parallel. For me, at least the way I see it, it can be there as kind of a guiding light and maybe a reinsurance. It can give you a bit of clarity in the dark. So, for example, at least for me, understanding purpose, even if it's through academic literature, it's mostly in an intellectual way, right? So it's not an embodied understanding, but it is still some understanding. So it can be reassuring. It can give me a direction to understand the process I'm going through.
Yeah, like an intellectual guiding.
Exactly.
if you will.
Exactly. But it's not complete, as you implied.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's because it's like being in this field, and I'm curious what your perspective is on this too, but like there is a clear difference of like something that has been written from a place that is embodying what it's talking about versus like something else. Or like, and by something else, I mean writing about something that is more like theoretical and less of a truth. And like I feel like there's going to be like resistance in me saying that because like then the question becomes like, what is a truth?
Well, I agree with you, but I think it's also the academic framework that imposes that.
Yeah.
So we do have an academic framework that is based on, it's related to the scientific method, and it's supposed to be peer-reviewed, verified, and so it's either empirical or theoretical.
Yeah.
And so by definition, it will be removed from an actual rating that is embodied and from someone's experience. But you can see, especially in the transpersonal fields, scholars that are bridging the two. I mean, that's the whole point of this field, is to bridge the mystical, the spiritual, and the academic.
Yeah, which is like it's like a frontier in a way, like a new frontier, and like also a kind of like a big responsibility in a way of like the researcher being able to like attempt to make that bridge. Like that seems like a big responsibility.
It is, I mean, because our whole society is built on the current scientific paradigm.
Yeah.
Right. Our whole understanding of reality is built on that. So now you have people who want to make this paradigm evolve. Right? So of course it is, and this implies also the evolution of society and how we see reality, how we interact with each other, and so on. So it is a big responsibility.
Yeah. I'm curious what you think about this too, because to me, and like you know a little bit about my journey, and I can share that with the audience as well. But for me, being in this program felt like the bridge to connecting with my faith, and almost to like shed a light on faith and believing in God. And because I feel like there's times when I've come across literature where it feels like this is trying to be too much here. Like it's trying to describe something that we don't know how to describe.
Like reaching the limits of language. Almost.
Yes. Yeah.
And having debates on very specific terms that try to describe something that is so remotely disconnected from language that it starts to lose meaning sometimes.
Yeah. So what do you make of that?
Well, I think for sure all these topics are not something that we can solve intellectually. It's something that we have to experience, and I do think that in the program they incorporate some of that. We have some practices to do and report about and introspect. So it is not purely intellectual, but for the intellectual side, I think we have to make do with the tools we have in this in this consciousness that we have right now. And what we have now, it's for most of us in this left brain oriented society, it is intellectual, it is language. And I think in this field where we're studying, both of us, we can see the limits of that.
Yeah.
But the field is very aware of that.
So I feel like that is where, to me, like in my head, I think of this as like that's a bridge that's being built, but there's only so far that the bridge can be built to, and then it's like then you got to jump or you stay where you are.
Yeah, exactly. And to jump, I guess more of society would have to jump with you. Otherwise, you're still gonna talk to other members of society who haven't made that jump, right? So by jump, I mean experiencing different forms of consciousness and spiritual practices different understanding of reality, maybe an embodied understanding, an intuitive understanding. If you are only part of society that is making this jump, you cannot really talk to each other very, very well, I think, if that makes sense.
That does. But for me, I was thinking the jump as like believing in God. And like by God, because like that word is like comes with so much, right? Like this is a word that like in like I was raised Jewish. In the Jewish tradition, sometimes they wrote it as like G-T because like they didn't even want to say it because it had like so much weight to it. And like I feel like that word is also a word that is like also pushing the limits of our language of like trying to create a concept that maybe not creating a concept, but by creating a word that encompasses a concept. To me, it made me realize, like, to be in these studies made me realize that, like, there's so much more to this that is beyond.
Yes, and I think with the word God, as you said, it's a loaded word. And also there are many, depending on what your spiritual beliefs are, or if you don't have spiritual beliefs, the word can have a completely different meaning. Because if I learned one thing in this program is that there are many different approaches to spirituality, religion, and they can be all kind of true at the same time, right? So you can have various definitions and approaches of God. I have a different approach than you. I have a different understanding, but that doesn't mean that our values are incompatible.
Let's wait one sec. I want to dig into this, and then I also want to hear your understanding of it as well. But I also want to define something for me first. Like for me, like my relationship and how I view God is that I see people can have different opinions of God, and like that I respect, but I see everyone as being a child of God. And like in that, it unites that we are all equal in being his children, you know? So I think that's how I view that. And yeah, so let me hear it. I want to hear your perspective on that.
So I find it quite interesting to listen to you saying that, because I would not use the same words. Because I don't have the same definition of God and what it means to be a child of God. But what I would say is almost basically the same thing. So that's why I found it interesting. You know, I don't know if it's really useful to go super into detail in what my own metaphysical beliefs are. But in broad strokes, I'm more towards the Advaita Vedanta, Hinduism or Buddhism side of things. So meaning that for me, of course, reality is not material; it's something more than that. I don't believe personally in God as a separate entity of whom we are the children of. But I do believe that we are part of one big entity, which you could call God, you could call the universe. Right, and we are all part of that. So in this way, we could say that we are all children of it. Right? You can call it God, the absolute, the divine. Doesn't really matter. We are all equal. We are all part of it. So we're all kind of children of it. We're all made of the same cloth. Right?
So then my question to you is, how is that different to you from what I said and what you said?
Well, I think mostly the words are different, and maybe the conception of what God is in the Abrahamic religion is different. But in the end, in terms of values and the core of the teachings, it's not that different.
Which is, and to me, that's really what it's about. Like, yes, the teaching, the core in the teachings, but it's also the main thing that it's about is like, what is our relationship to what I call God, what you call the universe or it. Like, that's what it's about, like that relationship. And transpersonal psychology very much goes over the limits of like organized religion, and is like dogma is like a huge problem with organized religion. And like we've seen that like throughout history, how people have justified the word of God to fight wars and to justify slavery. But I believe that is it's a misuse of I think it's incorrectly, it doesn't embody what it means to be faithful, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think what it boils down to, it would be, if we are really all children of God, if we are all part of the same consciousness, what does it mean in terms of the way we should treat each other and interact with each other and interact with the planet?
Yeah.
That's basically it. So indeed, I agree with you that anything that would create suffering in others through your actions, it's probably not the right path to go down.
Yeah. That's
It's like misappropriating the teachings, right?
Yes, exactly. And yeah, I think also as we're saying this, it makes me think too, it's like, wow, like I think this conversation is also transpersonal psychology is supposed to serve. Like it's serving the purpose by us being able to have this conversation. Yeah, so I feel like that's the purpose of this, is like, how can we bridge these gaps? Because like if this was like whatever 50 years ago, or maybe this was happening, but like I feel like that without this, sometimes people wouldn't have the framework and like the ability to like sit down and truly like listen to where somebody else is coming from and to meet them where they are. But like that's also not something that's just like intellectual, right? Like for us, like maybe it was the case for us where we both had like an intellectual understanding that allowed us to be able to get closer to here. But I feel like there's also a huge component of it that is like even though we have this understanding, like it still takes you and I to like sit down and like be patient with one another and understand one another,
Yeah, I mean, as you said, transpersonal psychology is focused also on individual and collective transformation and growth. This is not a process that is instant. It's a process that takes time, that is messy, that is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Some call it like a spiral development, But yes, I agree. It's also about figuring out how to live with ourselves better, together better, with the planet better. So it is serving, in my opinion, it is serving a very high purpose.
Yeah, I agree. At least in this conversation.
Yes, which is why we both chose to study it.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because for me, like it was that was my original intention in like pursuing this program, was to be able to have more of these types of conversations. However, at the time I didn't believe in God. So like for me, it like that my original intention was to like take this program to be able to talk about like different spiritual traditions and be able to talk with different people. However, like through the course of the program and like growing in my faith, it like has almost like transformed into something else. And like by something else, I mean like now like talking about my faith and being able to have different conversations with people of different backgrounds about my faith and their faith, or their belief in your belief in something.
I can relate to that. I mean, it's been kind of the same for me, meaning that you pursue a spiritual practice technique, or you enroll in this program, but you cannot really decide the direction that things will go to. Right? You can set, as I read in some text, I wish I could quote it, but I don't remember. They said you're basically merely creating a garden and setting the conditions for plants to grow.
Yeah.
You don't really know what's going to grow.
Yeah.
Right. So because things are made of serendipity and interactions with other people and things you could never expect to find out or learn. The whole story of psychological and spiritual growth, I think, is that you're setting the right conditions. You don't necessarily know where it's going in advance. And I think that relates to what you were saying before about purpose. Can we actually intellectually figure out what our purpose will be? Not really, because I think in big part it will be serendipitous.
Yeah.
It will just happen to you. If you set the right if you put the right conditions in place. So of course you cannot just sit back and do nothing in your life and expect that things will happen. But you can also not try to control life and intellectually figure everything out.
Yeah, because so much of it is bigger than us and just who we are.
It's infinitely bigger than what you can comprehend or control.
Yeah. So then I think just bringing this back to full circle, like the role of like purpose in academic literature remain as a like almost like of a guardrails, like, hey, like if you're slipping outside of this, like here's how you can like start to come back.
Yeah, I think the goal, they are trying to understand how people can be helped in figuring out their purpose.
Yeah.
So, it's coaching, for example, right? There are ways to set the right conditions so that you can understand what direction your purpose is. Also, purpose has it's quite important for health markers, like psychological health markers, physical health markers, even longevity. So of course psychology is interested in that, in making you succeed in life, succeeding not in terms of career or money, but succeeding in terms of well-being, happiness.
Yeah. So like looking at like the benefits of living a purposeful life.
I would say, meaning and purpose, I would say, are some of the most important areas in life to figure out. Right?
Yeah. I would agree.
Hence the podcast, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, hence, like, I mean, hence the podcast. But I think also it's like that's one of the biggest questions like we can ask, like, why are we here? Why am I here? What am I meant to do while I'm here? And and it's not even that, like, I think I appreciate what you said earlier too about like something along the lines of like we don't just have one purpose, but it's like how can I find meaning in my life and like live a life that's worth living? Like to me that's the question, like how do I live a life worth living? Because like go ahead.
Yeah, no, and it's not indeed, it's not only related to your life purpose as in, let's say, your main career direction, right? It's related to family life, your relationship with others, with the planet. Can be many things. So you can find meaning in most situations in life.
Which I feel like is also like so contradictory to like the Western society, and at least in the US, because like US has so much like hustle culture and like grind and do this, and like you can't live a fulfilling life unless you're working like 20 hours a day. And so I think that's something that's also like we need to be reminded of too, is like purpose doesn't only come from working like 20 hours a day and like sacrificing all the other areas of our life. Like maybe for some people and maybe for certain seasons of their life, but like like maybe it's like raising children, maybe it's gardening, maybe it's, like who I think the question that comes up for me when I think of this is like, who am I to tell someone what their purpose is, when it's like it's so unique to who someone is and their relationship to what I call God and what you call the universe.
I agree. It's extremely personal. Indeed, no one can tell you what your purpose is except yourself. That would be nice, actually, if if you could just be told what it is. But I think the fact that you have to figure it out is the point, right? I think it's also it's about the, to use a very common saying, it's about the journey, not the destination, right? I think that's completely true. I mean, I think you might think that you're pursuing a specific purpose.
Yeah.
You have a specific far away goal that you're trying to reach in your life. What will teach you the most and what you will learn from and where you will grow from, it's not by reaching the goal, it's everything you've done before reaching it. And by the time you reach it, it might not even be what you thought, and your goal will be different. So it will evolve with you, it will evolve at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like a goal too is like, I think it's important to have goals, right? In terms of like motivation and discipline, but at the same time, like a goal is also like either our desire or how we think things will go. And like, I feel like it's also, this is like so much bigger than us. Like, how can we like if we were to just hit our goals and be satisfied, we would be like, our identity would be rooted in our achievement rather than like our purpose and how we find meaning in what we're doing.
You can try to do that, but I think you'll realize quickly that it doesn't work. It's not bringing you happiness and fulfillment.
Yeah.
If you're just trying, if you think your purpose is just to check boxes and generate a certain amount of income,
yeah,
it might work for some. It might create the illusion for some time. It might work for some time.
Yeah.
But I think if you're not pursuing something that feels a bit bigger than yourself and bigger than material values, again, there might be counterexamples, but at least the way I see it, it will not bring you fulfillment.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think like sometimes people will hear that and they're like, oh, that means like I shouldn't make any money, I shouldn't have any money, and I need to like go move to a monastery. But I disagree with, I think that's like also this is an idea that of what we have in our head of how it needs to be. And like for some people, like maybe it is like having like a corporate job and making a ton of money, and maybe that's how they can best find purpose and serve others through their work. Like money is, like I heard this the other day from somebody, and they're like money is just a tool. Like money is neutral. It's not good or bad, but it's like our relationship to money is what can be bad. So like, yeah, it's like how can we use money also to serve others and to serve our purpose. And like, yeah. And when I say our purpose, it's not like just me, my own purpose that I've decided by myself. It's like my purpose based off of also like my relationship of what I call God too, which I would challenge someone to say, like, if you're like living your purpose, like, how is it impacting others? I think that's a question I would ask somebody. If someone comes to me and they're like, oh, I'm so sure I'm living a purposeful life, but like, I also feel empty, I'd be like, you're full of shit.
And I'm making others miserable around me.
Yeah, like in a nice way though, or in a loving way. Yeah, like yeah, I think you're wrong, but like, yeah. What do you think about that?
You touched on a few interesting points, and I think it goes back to the article you were telling me you have gripes with. Because for me, the way I see it, it's that purpose is quite related to your level of, I don't really like this word level, but let's use it, your level of psycho-spiritual development, your stage, let's say. Level would imply that there is something lower, higher, so I don't really like it. But let's say your stage of psycho-spiritual development.
Yeah.
And I think you need to go, and that's what the literature says as well, you need to go through the different stages to reach a stage where maybe money and your own interests don't matter that much, right? So you might have, that's what Taylor says in his article, you might first have, in the first stages of your life, you might have purpose wherein you will try to accumulate money and success. And perhaps that's what you need at this moment in your life. Perhaps if you tried at this stage of development that you had to give up all your money and go meditate in a cave, your psyche is not ready for that. Or if you try to dedicate yourself to others fully, your psyche is not ready for that. I think your purpose needs to feel natural and evident to you.
Yeah.
Right. So if you don't feel like you want to help others, you don't feel like you want to be altruistic, maybe you're not there yet. Maybe it will come later.
Yeah.
Right. I think you should also pursue what you feel you want to pursue at a specific stage of your life. And I think there is no harm in that. I mean, that there doesn't need to be a harm in that, and you should also not feel bad about that.
Yeah.
Because there is always time in your life to pursue more altruistic goals down the line, and maybe the money you made can help you in that. So I think there is no, right, if we look at it from a big picture, I don't think there is a good or bad purpose, right? It's just how individualistic, is it? How outwardly oriented is it? Is it oriented towards others? I would try to not use the terms good or bad or lower level, higher level. I think these are just dualities that we created to represent good, bad.
Yeah, I agree with you in the sense of like these like ways of saying like lower and higher spiritual development is like okay, but like who's like making that call? Like who's the judge? And like who am I to judge somebody else in that sort of way? Like I feel like that's a judgment that like we don't have a authority to make.
And also, a theory part of higher stages, if you call them higher stages, would be the disappearance of judgment also, right? So if you think you are at a higher stage of psycho-spiritual development and you're judging people who are less developed, maybe
it's
you
almost
need to
like
maybe you need to look
contradictory.
in the mirror. It's a bit contradictory, I would say.
I really empathize, or maybe not empathize is the right word, but maybe it is empathize with what you said too about like, maybe if like you're not at that point where, and like this doesn't really have to do with development, but like in your own life, if you don't feel called to like give your money away, like then don't do it. And like it reminds me about a Bible verse. I'm gonna pull it up.
I mean, I also don't want to imply that you should tell people don't give your money away, of course.
Yeah.
But I think there is no judgment necessary whatever people do, basically.
All right, here's what it is. All right. And this isn't giving anyone advice. This is 2 Corinthians 9, verses 6 through 8. And it says, so that in all things at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. And so it's not that like this verse isn't about like shaming. I feel like in spirituality, sometimes people feel shame if they're not giving enough away. And it's like, that's not what the verse says. The verse says to give with an open heart. So if we feel called to give, if you feel like in your heart it's right to give, then you give. But don't give, because if you don't give with an open heart, if you're giving reluctantly, then it doesn't bear the same fruits. And
yes. This is what I was gonna say. Indeed, I think giving or trying to be altruistic reluctantly will be so much less powerful than doing it from your heart.
Yeah, because then it's like you're not like altruistic reluctantly is like not altruistic. It's almost like it's the same thing as like that definition we were just talking about of being a like hypocritical almost. and maybe it's not in a like conscious way, like, oh, I'm being a hypocrite, but like it's like it's missing the point.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I will write down this verse. What I was thinking of is, so regarding sorry, I'm blinking out a bit.
Very good.
Yeah, regarding not pursuing a life purpose that is that is more altruistic than you feel you can do right now.
Mm-hmm.
I would say if you try to do that, if you repress maybe more materialistic desires that you might have,
Mm-hmm.
that might be actually detrimental to you, right? You're trying to skip in your development. If you feel like you have a desire to have more income, either maybe work to detach yourself from money a bit more, or maybe you need to have a bit more success before you can integrate that and go beyond that. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you're describing is like it's growing in our relationship to what I call God and what you call the universe. And like that's what I think they mean by like spiritual development, is like becoming this concept of like what Ferrer says of like becoming less self-centered. And there was another term that he used, I forget, and more do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I think I see the quote that you're trying to quote, and I also cannot remember it.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that like that's a good.
It's a move. It's a move away from self-centeredness.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing to like look. There's like it doesn't mean make it empirical and like okay now I need to like take a survey and like do this, but like I think it's a good thing to keep in mind and to be honest with yourself about, like, as to really think if you're growing in that sort of way. But like it's also becomes like if we're so obsessed with our growing, is like, is that even about, that's not about the journey then. That's like wanting to get to the destination quicker.
Yes, and it's maybe also confusing. It's like maybe treating being altruistic. So let's say, I would like to be more altruistic. I would like to. I would want to give all my money away.
Yeah.
It's like almost seeing that as a materialistic goal in itself. It's not something you can pursue. What you should develop is the mindset where you will want to do that. So I don't think you can, going to the point before where you cannot really control and manipulate your life into a purpose.
Yeah.
I think you cannot control what you really desire and what you want to do.
Yeah.
Right. So if you try to, you cannot make yourself be more altruistic just by your own force of will.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's where the practices come in. And like I think it's a great thing to want to give, like I want to give. I don't want to give, but like I want to be able to give. And like praying on that, meditating on that, reading scripture about that. Yeah. That's I think that's how we can start to grow in that sort of aspect.
Yeah, exactly. I think it is about practice in the end.
Yeah.
Whatever practice might be for you, whether it is meditation, prayer, like altruistic work, helping the homeless, yoga, whatever it might mean to you, whatever practice might help your well-being and psychological and spiritual development.
Yeah.
That is what will lead to the biggest change in mindset and what will make your purpose maybe evolve down the road.
Yeah.
Of course, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't pursue specific goals. There is a proactive purpose development. You might still want at the same time to take steps to reorient your purpose, but it will probably be much easier to take those steps if you are in the right mindset.
Yeah.
Right? If you try to quit that's why maybe I haven't done it yet, right? If you want to quit your corporate career and go live in a Buddhist center, maybe wait until you actually really want to do that and don't force yourself to do that if you're not ready to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would be curious to know what were your gripes with the article.
Yeah. And for those who are listening, Pierre is talking about the Taylor 2016 article on, do you know the title? I don't have the title in front of me, but
I think it's transpersonal purpose, so I'm not sure. Let me check quickly.
I think the big thing, it felt like it didn't acknowledge that there was something about purpose that's like outside of ourselves. And to me, it seemed like it was like talking about how like we form our own purpose like completely ourselves.
Well, maybe with one exception, because it does mention that, for maybe people who are particularly gifted or spiritually advanced, there does come a point where it feels like and maybe you've interviewed people who feel like that your purpose comes from, almost like it comes from an external source, like it's so obvious that it's been given to you. Like there is no choice but to pursue it.
I totally missed that part.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I suppose you interviewed people who feel this way, right? That's the people who are very inspiring to listen to.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can find this in athletes, many leaders, people who feel like they've been put on this earth to do a particular mission, and they have zero doubts that this is their mission.
Yeah.
And I have an interesting example, which is, just let me try to find his name. It's an Indian mathematician. Yeah, so Ramanujan, right? Who he had, I'm not an expert in mathematics, but he had very important contribution to mathematics breakthroughs. And basically he was saying that it was a divinity that was giving equations to him. He was having visions. So for him, this is like the extreme example where the purpose is actually given to you by God, directly. And I think you have many examples. Of course, you have less extreme examples where people still feel like our purpose has been given to them, like they're here on Earth for a specific mission.
Yeah. I guess to me then, like the article felt like that was like a completely different thing than like the levels of it, I guess, was like what felt like wrong about it, you know? Like I feel like the hierarchical ranking of purpose was like, I feel like that what you described it's like a different form, like it's the same thing. And I think that people are able to cultivate that with their relationship with God or the universe. So I don't think that those are like essentially that different.
Yeah, maybe we should just recap for the listeners that in this article, there are different levels of purpose development. So if I remember correctly, what is the first one? Is it individualistic or personal accumulative? So the purpose where you're mostly focused about yourself and your own success.
Yeah.
And then purpose becomes more altruistic. Right, and in the end, he outlines what he calls transpersonal purpose, where in this case, it's what I was describing before, where it comes from an external source and it becomes obvious and even more altruistic. But and then maybe we're just hitting the limitations of academics again, is that as soon as you try to create a model for something or you create a hierarchy, it's much more subtle than that, and it varies from individual to individual. So I think what we have to do when we see academic texts like this is not maybe take them to the letter, but just try to absorb the spirit of it. And of course, it's not going to be like this for everyone. And of course, any hierarchy and model has limits, and it's not always applicable. But I think just what the article wanted to explain is that purpose can evolve from more very individualistic to transpersonal.
Yeah. And I think that for me, like that was, I guess, like I was like trying to like take it literally. And I think that's why I felt that way about it. And
I found this hierarchy, you can make parallels with different hierarchies of development in the transpersonal literature. So, for example, Wilber's integral model also has kind of a hierarchical development.
Yeah.
And of course, these models have limitations that they have to be taken for what they are, right? They are just models. So another very common saying, the map is not the territory.
Yeah.
It just gives us, maybe a light in the dark, a beginning of an understanding of how things work. But then you have to figure out what it means for you. What is your own process? What is your own map of development?
Yeah.
Because it might be very different from what you read in the literature.
Yeah.
The way you experience it might be very different.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also too, there's like comparing that article to now comparing Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, it felt like, I know one is a man's account for his life and surviving Auschwitz and and being a psychiatrist or a therapist, but it just felt to me it felt like there was more truth ingrained in that. And by truth, this is how do you define truth? But this concept of giving in and accepting reality allowed him to find purpose. And so I think what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of value in using our experience to talking about purpose. And I think that in stories and in our lived experience, it allows the truth to really come to life more so than in a model. And yeah. So what do you think of that?
Well, again, I agree. It kind of goes back to the same point, is that you have to create your own meaning. And I think Frankl's book is quite powerful for that. It's quite an inspiring book. Man's Search for Meaning. The model is not going to give you your purpose or your meaning.
Yeah.
And as you say, actually, it does go beyond purpose. So Frankl doesn't talk only about purpose; he talks mainly about meaning, and meaning can be even what is the meaning of the loss of someone.
Yeah.
Right. It's the meaning in everyday situations, and there can be a lot of meaning that maybe sometimes we miss. That would be useful to reflect on.
Yeah. And so I think if I'm an academic and I'm taking this away, and if someone's hey, what should I read? I want to know about purpose. What should I read? I would point them in the direction of Man's Search for Meaning, rather than oh, here's this article that describes different levels of purpose.
Yeah, well, maybe I see what you mean. It's more, it feels more embodied, maybe, or more true description of what meaning feels like, and not what it is theoretically like in a psychological model.
Yeah, especially in this time of biohacking, when people are looking for the data to support the next self-help trend that they can do. Oh, I need to sit in the cold plunge for 7.5 minutes because that's what these studies say, So yeah. But here, I want to read this quote from Man's Search for Meaning, because I found this to be just really inspiring. And this is on page 134. He says, "Our generation is realistic, for we have come to know man as he really is. After all, man is that being who invented the gas chambers of Auschwitz. However, he is also that being who entered those gas chambers upright, with the Lord's Prayer or the Shema Yisrael on his lips." And I find that really powerful, as in this is the duality of I guess it doesn't really have to do with purpose, but just to be able to recognize that is being able to see how this is outside of himself. And as being someone who is literally in Auschwitz, and being on the other end of all of this, yet he is still able to look outside of it all. And that's where the purpose is. That's where our purpose is. He would not be able to find that purpose if you're not able to like look outside of yourself.
Yeah, and I think this quote also illustrates that man is capable of the worst and also the best, right?
Yeah.
And so what you can decide for yourself is what, like, it's infinitely, you can go infinitely towards the good. So how much do you want to go there?
Yeah.
Basically, to which extent are you ready to transform your life to serve a greater good?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I think this is a good place to end. Thank you for coming
Thank you,
on. It was
Jason.
a pleasure.
Likewise.